morning, Africa. Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, Akwa Ibom State. It's a beautiful Wednesday morning. A good day to rise and shine wherever you are. This is Rise and Shine. And we're coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. My name is Uyai Aneken, and I am super delighted and thankful to be here this morning.
And I'm Frank United. Glad to have you join us. It's midweek, and of course, it's been quite an eventful 3 days so far in the month of September. And
today's the 6th?
Yeah, today's the 6th. Eventful 6 days so far in the month of September. And the atmosphere in the country is pretty much tense right now. Trying to analyze how much has been achieved by respective administration, both at the state level and at the federal level, talking about the leadership of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu. So a lot is happening, and of course we're here to talk Nigeria and things within and outside Nigeria that concerns each and every one of us.
Of course, we are here to talk Nigeria, and there is no way we will talk Nigeria without your contribution. This is your country. So please take advantage of our social media platforms, all of which you can find at spectrumtv.ng. Please get to our Twitter handle, X now, at SpectrumT Online. Send in your contributions, your concerns, your questions on the issues that will be raised on the floor of Rise and Shine this morning. Like I said, today we are marking and conversing about the first 100 days of the Bola Ahmed Tinubu-led administration. What are your thoughts about his leadership so far, the policy reforms, and every conversation that has trailed the first 100 days? How would you say that Mr. President has fared so far? Of course, we also know that some of these, conversations are cutting across different state governments. The golden era has also done 100 days here in Akwa Ibom State. Of course, we'll be taking out time to look into these things. Some people have rather given very impressive strides in their move in the first 100 days. I know that the governor of Akwa Ibom State, Pastor Moino, has really put out a solid foot. But I don't know if that is what Nigerians will say about President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Well, you might think the governor in Akwa Ibom State, for instance, has put up his best foot forward so far, but there are people who have a different view. When you look at the expectations, look at the campaign promises that the governor made, of course, we're going to have those dissenting views, and those dissenting views actually act as a pointer to guide the leadership of the state to go in a direction that the people really want. But of course, at the national level, looking at President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, there have been some key policy statements of his administration, but how effective those policies have been, how efficient they have been to the much desired advancement of the Nigeria's economy would be a question Nigerians will ask at this point, because just a few weeks back we saw the federal government beginning to make excuses for why Ahmed Bola Tinubu might not have been able to achieve what he sets out to do within the first 100 days in office. We saw the allegation that the Ahmed Bola Tinubu administration inherited a very bad, battered economy. So that was the beginning of the excuses already, pushed forward by the leadership of this present administration. But then every administration has always found the way to blame their predecessor for their inability or ineptitude on their part. But we do hope that Ahmed Bola Tinubu will be able to move past, pointing accusing fingers and blaming his predecessor, former President Muhammadu Buhari, for the situation in the country.
Of course, these are great expectations. Let's go all the way to the very, very top of our conversation on our flash news for this morning. Of course, yesterday was the 5th of September, and the Nigerian Labour Congress had said they were going to go on a 2-day warning strike. And of all the conversations that were put forward, they did not draw back with regards to that particular, move. As we saw banks also, shut down activities yesterday in solidarity to the 2-day warning strike. We had conversations of how this abruptly affects productivity in the country, and even when we are talking of earnings. So we are losing money, we are losing time, we are losing a lot of things if we disrupt, the system in such manner. But of course, the NLC did go on with that particular strike, and we saw, compliance, strict compliance with the NLC strike in Kaduna, Edo, and Cross River State. There were state governments and different parastatals that followed through with the move of the NLC yesterday. Of course, that warning strike is to take yesterday and today.
Well, we also saw Akwa Ibom State NLC, also enforcing the strike action there. The state secretariat was shut down under lock and keys, and we had the monitoring team from the NLC parading themselves across different government offices to ensure that nobody gained entrance. I'd like for us to just take a pause and listen to the NLC chairman in Akwa Ibom State, and then we'll come back.
After the sudden removal of fuel subsidy, though it was a very painful thing, but it was a welcome development. We were only placing the cat before the horse, which is not supposed to be the case. However, Mr. President came in on the 29th of May. He had some time before the 6 months budgetary appropriation that was made by the former president, which is naturally supposed to end in the last day of June. So he had at least a month to have set up modalities before removing the fuel subsidy. The issue of sexual is dated back into like 20 years before he came into power. Recall also further when in 2012, the president, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, wanted to remove fuel subsidy. The current president of Nigeria, Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was in forefront of rejecting the fuel subsidy removal without putting in palliative modalities to cushion the effect. He made statements that is in public domain right now in 2012 January. And therefore, God help you that 13 years after you've made such a landmark declarations in support of Nigerian masses as to what needs to be done for Nigerian masses, you became president and you did not keep to your words, which you advise another president to do, is rather unfortunate.
Of course, removal of fuel subsidy remains, the top burner in the conversation between the NLC and the federal government. They are asking that the federal government moves in, a better way to make sure that they have provided means to cushion the effects of the fuel subsidy removal. This has been the conversation. Remember that on the 2nd of August, the NLC and the TUC had gone and had a nationwide protest to this effect. But it's like after the 2nd of August, nothing tentative has been done to really ameliorate the plight of Nigerians at this time. Yes, there has been conversations with the NLC, TUC, and the government, but it looks like the NLC, the Joe Ajero-led NLC, is still very dissatisfied with the moves of the federal government at this time to wade into the issue. We've seen promises of transportation aid coming from the federal government. So far, so good. We haven't seen the federal government and several other, state governments implement this. What we've rather heard the most is conversations about Maisali bags of rice to be distributed and some paltry sums of money. How far does this actually cushion the effect of the subsidy removal? That is gradually, is biting and biting harder. When you put that together with, the high cost of living everywhere, it brings to bear why the NLC at the national level keeps hammering on, these kinds of activities.
Well, of course, listening to the NLC chairman, some key indices are very much appreciated by Nigerians. First, they're asking for the presidency, the federal government to look into providing transportation system, subsidized transportation system across the nook and crannies of the country. They're also asking for the removal of the fuel subsidy. Apart from that, they're also asking the presidency to also order and direct the police to vacate the National Association of Road Transport Workers offices that has been on the siege by the men and women of the police force. Of course, we saw NLC enforcing this compliance level across board, across some of the states of the Federation, and that is something that is definitely on two sides. One, Nigerians are saying at this point in time, we cannot afford to have the country being locked down because already our economy is battered. So in the event that we shut down indefinitely, in the instance where the federal government and the NLC are not able to come to a common ground and the issues so far resolved, then we might be looking at Nigeria heading towards a worse economic downturn, because you can almost imagine shutting down every sector of the Nigerian economy indefinitely would mean that no business is working, nothing is going to work. Because this time around, if we follow the words of the NLC chairman in Akwa Ibom State, they're going to ground the airport, they're going to ground offices, they're going to ground literally everywhere. So nothing is going to function in the country. And Nigerians are hoping that the federal government is sensitive enough to the plight of the country and then will come to the dressing table and put an end to this before it even gets out of hand. And one of the accusations that the NLC have said is that the federal government has been lackadaisical in their manner of dealing with the negotiations. And like one of our analysts said yesterday, you can't set up a committee, begin negotiation when there is a strike or when there is a protest, and then immediately that protest is called off, immediately the strike is suspended, you go back to sleep. And then wait until the next time a strike notice is being pushed forward or a protest notice is being pushed forward before the government, rises up again and calls up for a meeting. That has been given as one of the reasons that the NLC had to boycott the meeting that happened between the federal government and the TUC, because they didn't see any sense in it. How do you see it as a government on the negotiation, and the only time you feel it is necessary for you to meet with labor unions or the people you're trying to negotiate with is when they're issuing a strike order, when they're trying to protest? It is completely out of place. It is completely insensitive on the part of the federal government, completely anti-people for these kinds of scenarios to play out. Recall before the protests actually happened nationwide, there were those allegations that since the committee was set up, there has been no meeting. The NLC and TUC leaders will show up, but the negotiators from the part of the federal government will not show up. So this clearly shows that the government is not committed to putting an end to these kinds of challenges and crises in Nigeria. It shows they do not have the interests of Nigerians at heart. And if they do, I do hope that before it gets to a point where everybody, because this time around it's crazy. You have the banking sectors, you have civil society organizations, you have practically every sub-union in the country declaring their support for the NLC at this point. So that means the health sector will be grounded, the financial sector will be grounded, the aviation sector will be grounded, every aspect of the economy will be grounded. And one can almost imagine how that will affect the cost of living in Nigeria.
Of course, these are still pertinent conversations. Like you said, it looks like it looks quite manipulative when that keeps happening, because at the end of the day, we are not looking at how we are going to solve the problem on the table. Remember that the Minister of Labour, now Simon Lalong, had actually reached out to Joe Ajero, the leadership of the NLC, asking that he be given some time to settle into the office, and then he would look into the demands of the NLC with regards to moves to cushion the effect of the fuel subsidy removal. But this conversation has gone on way before the Minister of Labour came in. Now, if at all, once he got into the office, it would have been clear that one of the strongest, files to deal with will be the conversation of the NLC with the federal government, because at this time it's more like, the Minister of Labour is representing the labor unions in Nigeria and representing the government at the same time. He must find the bridge to be able to solve the problems that are on ground. If this continues to linger, how is it going to affect, Nigeria in the overall? How is it going to affect the economy, the productivity of the nation? This needs to be looked into, and the back and forth with the meetings should actually really hold. And the conversation just goes back and forth. Is this a holistic move by the NLC? And then, like one of the videos we saw this morning, when it looks like there is a sect of people within these labor unions that want to go ahead with the strike, and other people that are saying, you know what, let's just keep working. Now, this, it presents a divided front. And when we keep pushing these kinds of narrative also, it doesn't land well for the united pursuit of the labor unions. So both the labor unions and the federal government need need to come to a consensus so that these issues are absolutely dealt with. But we're going to move away from the issue of the NLC and the federal government. We hope that it settles pretty much soon, and palliative should become a realistic, activity and statement in, the state governments at this time. But there's been a major rift going on between the lead men of Edo State. Speaking of Governor Obaseki and his deputy, Shaibu. Now, of course, we saw the fact that the Deputy Governor, Philip Shaibu, had written to Federal High Court in Edo State, alleging plots by the state governor, Godwin Obaseki, to remove him from office. There's been all kinds of rifts going on between the two. And, of course, in the suit that was filed by Shaibu, he named the Inspector General of Police, State Security Service, the Governor of Edo State, and the Chief Judge of Edo State as defendants in the case. Of course, he was asking that the court look into Governor Obaseki's move to remove him from office. We also see that the Deputy Governor stated that the decision, now he has actually withdrawn the suit that he filed against Godwin Obaseki and the Edo State government at the court. Now, he's saying that his reason for withdrawing the suits came after a series of meetings which involved himself and some well-meaning citizens of Edo State and Nigerians, of course, also including party leaders, traditional rulers, and the Archbishop Benin Archdiocese of the Catholic Church. Now, of course, he's saying that with this, with due respect to these eminent personalities and leaders whose persuasions and persons he cannot ignore, he, of course, Comrade Philip Shaibu has authorized and instructed his solicitors to withdraw the suit forthwith. Now, of course, he says he wishes to sincerely thank and appreciate the well-meaning Nigerians, party leaders, traditional leaders, and everyone who came out to advise and encourage him in, the process to ensue peace and unity in Edo State. I think this is a very, very strong move right there by the Deputy Governor of Edo State. It has been a cat and mouse race. Governor Godwin Obaseki has withdrawn several things from Philip Shaibu from the Deputy Governor's office, and one would keep asking, is it just because Shaibu had insinuated an aspiration to become governor of the state? How did this affect the relationship so badly?
Well, of course, power tussles are always going to go either ways unless one person is willing to sheath his sword and then seek for peace. I recall the last time we handled this conversation, I said the people that are going to suffer are the Edo people and not the two elephants, the two giants that are suffering. So it's a good thing, it's an interesting twist to see that Shaibu has withdrawn his suit at the court. That is the first step, a first indication that is willing to come to a common ground with the governor. And I do hope that the governor also, in a leap of good faith, will be able to come to the negotiation table and be able to talk things out with Shaibu so that whatever conflict, as a reason between the two of them can actually be resolved. In as much as he's presently the deputy governor, there is nothing stopping him from aspiring to be the governor, whether or not he's still in office as the deputy governor. So if he happens not to be within the tradition of politicians, not to be the preferred candidate of Obaseki, well, Obaseki can also, state his grounds. Okay, this is your aspiration, I respect that, but you are not my preferred candidate. Of course, at the end of the day, it is the people of Edo who are going to decide who their leader is going to be. So these in no way should bring enmity between two leaders who are supposed to work together in the overall best interest of the Edo people. So it's a good twist, and I do hope and pray in the interest of the people that these two can put an end to this long feud that has been on for a while.
And speaking of, long feud that has gone on, now we have seen what Philip Shaibu has done. We must also see Godwin Obaseki willing to also sheath the sword because he has made some very strong moves against the office of the Deputy Governor of Edo State also. He should also be willing to sheath his sword and, change the narrative of some of the moves that have been made against the person and the office of of the, deputy governor at this time. But I think very instructive in this conversation is the fact that we see the roles that traditional rulers and religious affiliations hold in maintaining peace and order in our different, state government. So this is a really, really good move that has been made. We must, see how we can tally all the agents of government and humanity in settling disputes in the state government at the federal level, because I mean this field might have continued to a very, very large extent if we did not have the likes of, the Archbishop of the, Catholic Archdiocese in Edo State coming, these things would have happened they wouldn't have happened the way they have happened so far. So this is a good move. The place of traditional rulers cannot be overemphasized in the settling of disputes and religious bodies. So this is currently good for the Edo State government, and we hope that the Governor, Godwin Obaseki, also takes this particular step.
Well, if you know politicians and how they work, definitely we should see Obaseki being able to pay keen attention to the advice and counsels of these traditional leaders, religious leaders, because whether or not you like it, these people wield a very great power that can affect your chances and your political aspirations. So you will be shooting yourself in the foot if all the leaders come together and speak to you to seek redress, and then you feel just because you're presently in government, you can do and undo. Well, they'll be waiting for you at the end of your 4 years to see how you get back to that position. So I do want to believe Obaseki is a fine gentleman as he is, and will be able to listen. And then, of course, these two will sheathe their swords and commence working together in the interest of the Edo people. And that, of course, will bring about the much advancement and development like the people are yearning for.
Okay, of course, still on our major stories this morning, we are seeing the conversations that is coming out from the National Assembly. The fact that they're saying they do not have any expenses to cut down on. We have been saying that the cost of governance is one thing that is impoverishing Nigeria. If we would cut down the cost of governance, especially at the national level, then a lot of the debts that we have run into as a country will not be subsisting. But of course, we saw that the chairman of the Senate Committee on Media and Public Affairs, Senator Yemi Adamodu, told journalists in Ilorin, Kwara State on Monday that the National Assembly is not responsible for any economic hardship experienced in Nigeria. We also saw the fact that he said he identified what he described as many congent roles, including committee works and oversight roles played by lawmakers without any allowances attached. Now, he insisted that calls for them to cut down on expenses cannot be valid. Now, this is the conversation coming out from Kwara State. Of course, we saw Adaramodu make the remarks moments after the tribunal ruled in his favor, upholding the All Progressives Congress APC's towards electoral victory against Senator Biodun Olujimi. So this is the conversation that is had. Now, you're saying that they have no expenses to cut down on, and they sit on some of those ad hoc committee proceedings without any form of allowances. Francis?
Well, it's heartbreaking to see the senator speaking in that regard. When you look at the amount of money the senators take back as allowances, accommodation allowances, seating allowances, traveling allowances, medical allowances, all of the allowances that they take home, and then you combine that and then you put a figure to it, you see that one person is literally sitting on the level of wealth that could transform the lives of more than 10, 20, 30 community persons at a stretch. But it's not surprising to see the senator making that comment, because first you look at the ideals of men. Every man who is on top of power will literally want to continue usurping power, usurping the entitlement that comes with the office, literally for themselves. Part of the reasons in Nigeria that politicians see getting elected or getting into political offices as a do or die affair has been traced down to the financial benefits that is attached to those offices. So if you take away those financial benefits and reduce it to a civil servant kind of structure, a lot of politicians who would do just anything to get into power would cease being politicians. They'll go get a job. They'll go get a career. They'll go get a business running. So when that conversation started about having the National Assembly cutting down costs, having the federal government cutting down costs, and when they kept on asking Nigerians to sacrifice, and Nigerians, of course, in turn asked them to sacrifice as well, I knew for a fact that it would take an extra miracle on the part of God or one supreme being for the people at the National Assembly, both the Senate and the House of Rep, to be able to come to terms with the idea of cutting down cost of governance, of sacrificing a bit of what they take home on a monthly basis in the interest of the Nigerians. I think it was from Kenya that a member of the parliament rose up and spoke against cost of governance. And of course, this stands itself from everything that was happening in the interest of the people. And Nigerians took to social media to comment that parliamentarian for the ground she stood. But how many of our leaders can actually say, you know what I have is more than enough, and rather than look at how we can increase what we are taking home, let's look at reducing it and putting it back to the country to better the lives of the people we are here to represent. That is the kind of spirit that you would see. We've had leaders in Nigeria, we've had leaders in Africa, and part of the reasons African continent is still the way it is most African countries, apart from the few who have visionary leaders, is because leaders, people who call themselves leaders, are actually opportunists who find themselves in the corridors of power. And when they do find themselves within the corridors of power, they just don't want to let go, and they don't want to do anything that will be in the interest of the people significantly. They might do one or two little things that might not, really change the narrative. But to do projects, formulate policies that will make the average man become somebody in the country, that's a big problem. And if we don't look at these scenarios that is, currently trending, the spate of military coups, as far as experts are concerned, might just become the new order of the day, because the people within the continent are tired. They have been pushed for so long. They have been pressed on the wall for so long. They have been patient for way too long. And the adverse effect of that over patientness is actually getting to bounce back.
I think some of the strongest, reactions with regards to some of the statement that has been made by the Senate is the fact that most Nigerians believe that a monocameral system is, just enough for us, and then all that they should get in that kind of system will just be sitting allowances instead of all the other benefits and salaries that they take home. And, a lot of Nigerians are also of the opinion that if we practice true federalism, only the House of Representatives will be enough to, handle some of the conversations that we do handle. Because, having these houses being duplicated and literally almost performing same functions just at different levels, it's still part of the cost of governance. When you add that to all the other appointments that are done, it still increases how much the government needs to spend on sustaining this lawmakers in these houses. But of course, this will not go without reactions from Nigerians. Several people reacting. A lot of Nigerians believe that this country can actually survive without the Senate, as it were. But these are issues that continue to plague the country, and you can see how ardently these lawmakers are trying to defend how much they earn. You cited very well the lawmaker in Kenya who even moved a motion that, salaries of public office holders will be reviewed downward. And this is something that we are not sure that we can see any Nigerian lawmaker actually even push. Let's not forget the fact that most of them have been in those houses upwards of 10 years. So they've earned those amounts of money and even more over 10 years. If you are going to reduce how much those earnings are able to, you will still be absolutely fine. the NLC is going on this abrupt strike because they are asking move minimum wage from 30,000 to 200,000 naira. But we know that the strongest conversation has been that the federal government cannot even afford to make that kind of move. Will they be able to pay how many millions of Nigerians on their payroll 200,000 naira bill as minimum wage? But if you cut down the cost of governance, sweep it across from the Senate down to other sectors, we'll be able to beef up the percentage of minimum wage. Even if it doesn't get to 200,000 naira, there will be much more that we can do for the active, productive age and demography of Nigeria. But of course, this remains conversations and remain controversies in these spaces. We'll just move on to the very next story that we have here. Of course, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as of 2 nights ago, had left Nigeria at midnight to head to India as a means to honor the invitation of the Prime Minister of India, Modi, to be a member, at the G20 summit. This has been great conversation for Nigeria so far. Of course, we see the fact that him attending this summit in India is to see where he can interrelate with trade organizations, global economy, climate change conversations, and also the war in Ukraine is a subject on the agenda at the summit. Now, Nigerian presidency spokesperson Ajirin Gelali had said the country wanted to join the G20, but that discussions were underway within the government to assess the benefits that being a member of the G20 will bring to the country. Now, of course, we also see the fact that Gelali had said that when the consultations are completed, the government will decide whether or not it is appropriate for the country to apply. Now, the president's participation in the G20 summit in India is part of these objectives. Of course, we will see the president use his eyes and ears as he attends the summit to see if Nigeria, being a part of the G20 summit, which is the 18th one being held at this time, will be beneficial to the economy and the democracy of Nigeria as we continue to navigate our waters. Of course, he will also take part in a roundtable discussion with Indian and Nigerian business leaders and several industrialists at this time. We see that the likes of Tony Elumelo, Tedola, and some frontline business owners in Nigeria were part of the league of businessmen who are attending that particular summit with the president.
Well, part of the conversation that surfaced after the BRICS summit that was held in South Africa was the fact that of all the countries that were invited and the countries that formed that allegiance of the emerging economies, Nigeria was not a part of it. And that spiral out a different line of conversation. First, that Nigeria was not even positioning itself in terms of economic policies to be part of such an elite group of countries. And of course, these countries are striving very hard to move their economies forward and of course be able to compete with developed nations and put themselves at par with other nations who are advancing economically. And for that to actually happen, for Nigeria to be part of most of these blocs aimed at advancing the livelihood of the people of the respective country, there are certain things that must be done. And one of the easiest or one of the most important criteria happens to be the ease of doing business in the respective country. What are those policies that would encourage MSMEs to thrive in the country? What are the policies that have been put in place to engender foreign direct investment? What are the policies that have been put in place to ensure that when people come in to do business in your country, they're not going to run aground in a few years? And of course, the question of security is also very paramount because without security, no investor is going to come in. Without security, businesses are not going to thrive. So a lot of conversations about the level of preparedness that Nigeria has to be part of these committee of nations coming together to push a conversation about bolstering their economy is always very much appreciated by Nigerians and much talked about. But it seems that with the present moves by the Ahmed Bola Tinubu-led administration, regardless of how much has been done so far or the few policies that has been reeled out by Ahmed Bola Tinubu, we are yet to see the efficacy of those policies. We are yet to see the impact of those policies. We are yet to see the desired ambience or environment for businesses brought about by those policies. So as a result of that, I think Nigerians would, look at this BRICS summit with mixed feeling. For one, the federal government says is reviewing the criteria and reviewing the terms and conditions, and that's one conversation. The other conversation is looking at the Nigerian landscape, looking at the Nigerian policy landscape right now. Can we or do we as a country have what it takes for those Committee of Nations to actually welcome Nigeria to sit on the table in terms of advancing the economy? It's one thing I would always say for the presidency to go outside the shores of Nigeria and begin to woo investors. It's another thing for those investors to look at the indices in your country and see that, yes, they can actually come in, transact business, and be able to make gainful profits.
We must also note the fact that South Africa is the only African nation that is a G20 member at this time. And one would be thinking, what are the benefits of even being a member of, the G20? We are looking at collective contribution of up to 80% of global GDP. And also we are looking at 75% of international trade, and housing gets 60% of world's population. And the G20 constitutes significant economic power, look for socio-economic opportunities and geopolitical stability. So if we have a country, being a member of the G20, a lot of these percentages are accrued to the members of the G20 bloc. And if Nigeria evaluates the constitution of the G20 and weighs how beneficial it will be for Nigeria if they become part of these bloc, we will begin to see certain increases. But I think part of the biggest concerns will be not just about joining the G20. When these percentages are accrued to you as a member of the G20, I think one of our biggest problems in Africa is leadership and management of funds. It goes beyond, the kinds of resources that are available at our disposal. What do our leaders do when they get these kinds of waivers, these kinds of contribution from world powers because of the blokes that they are, that they are a part of? So if at all Nigeria at the end of this 18th G20 summit decides that yes, they want to pull through with applying for membership at the bloc and they are accepted, how will we interpret our membership of the G20 to be beneficial to us? We know that it will expose us to more international foreign investment in Nigeria. It will highlight our, what will I call it, how good we are for these kinds of investments in the eye of the foreign nations. But like he said, it is one thing to pitch for a business, it's another thing to be able to adequately execute it when it comes to our fall. But of course, at this time we're also going to keep eyes open for some of the conversations that Nigeria is going to herald at the G20 summit, top of which is climate change related conversations and how Africa can rather be a player in the whole module instead of a victim. So much more to look out for at this particular G20 summit at this time.
Well, it's a conversation that Nigerians are really looking forward to, and we do hope that if the Ahmed Bola-led administration is very keen on changing and transforming the narrative of the Nigerian economy, then policy statement, the political will needs to be exerted at this point through the policy statements, policy formulations, policy implementation, because it is not just about formulating the policies, it's also about implementing the policies so that we can see to the extent that these policies have been effective. Because when you have lofty policies in place and there are no strict implementation, there are no compliance across board, then the policies will just remain policies that are formulated on the pages of papers or published on the internet. So beyond the policy formulation, beyond the creating of the enabling environment, there is also a question of political will, there's a question of accountability, transparency, Recall we've been having conversations about repatriation of funds by foreign airlines for a while now in the country, and that also paints a dirty image of the country for foreign investors to come in. I mean, nobody wants to come into your country, invest, make profit, and is not able to access his or her money when the time requires for it, or when the need to access it. So a lot needs to be done on the Nigerian part to ensure that these foreign bodies, these foreign blocks, should we be fortunate enough to meet the criteria and be able to be admitted into them, we will not be, found wanting in terms of proffering those solutions and being able to have a seamless and hitch-free trading opportunities and environment for businesses to thrive. So when we do have that, then many would appreciate the government of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, because if there is anything that will change the narrative of Nigeria, it is having multiple sustainable businesses thriving in the country. With this, you have a lot more job opportunities, you have a lot more vibrant economy. Of course, bridging that gap of the high and the low without the middle class will be completely, taken out, because the middle class family will return to the table. And of course, with the returning of the middle class across boards, then you have, people at the lower cadre having a sustainable means of livelihood. So it is very critical that Nigeria looks into this criteria and does, beyond the politicking that happens across board when situations like this arises, to actually exert its political will and ensure that they meet up and then they sustain the tempo, so that these investment direct foreign investment and every benefit that accrues or should come to Nigeria as a result of being part of these countries will definitely come.
Well, that's definitely it with the conversation on Nigeria. President Tinubu is currently in India with some other elder statesmen in the business sector to attend the G20 summit. Let's see how this becomes overall beneficial to Nigeria on the return, and how things gleaned from that summit will be interpreted into the day-to-day running of our business climate and every other related conversation. But at this time, we're going to take a quick break now and join Mary Joseph, who is on standby for us at the News Brief desk. When we return, our interview segment and several other conversations will be brought to you on Rise and Shine. So do stay with us. It's been 100 days since Bola Ahmed Tinubu assumed office as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, greeting Nigerians with a catchphrase in his inaugural speech: "Petrol subsidy is gone," a move widely agreed by most to be in the best interest of Nigeria, but wrongly timed.
No provision is there for fuel subsidy. The fuel subsidy is gone.
At a time of great economic difficulties marked by very high socio-political tension. And that's where it all began for him and Nigerians as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. The days and weeks that have followed have been greeted with the good, the bad, and the ugly, as several controversies have plagued the Tinubu-led administration. With his moves in policy reforms, the appointment of service chiefs, constitution and swearing in of 45 ministerial cabinet members, arguably a recycling of old politicians to serve the country.
The men and women who have been sworn in have been carefully selected by me for their track record of excellence and achievement in public and private sector.
The big move with the students' loan bill signed into law.
If we all believe that education is the greatest weapon against poverty, then we have to invest in it. And that poverty should not prevent anybody, any child, including the daughter or son of a wood seller or barley seller or yam seller, from attaining their.
Reactions birthed premised on the impact of fuel subsidy removal, paving way for nationwide protest by the Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC) and the trade union organization TUC, which firmed up negotiation conversations still yet to yield fruit beyond the promises of palliative initiatives of the federal and state government across the 36 states and the FCT, with current disbursed funds to some state government reported at 2 billion naira.
Issue of 8,000 naira to be given to the poorest of the poorest. We are not a party to it. 8,000 naira,
1,000 every year.
He cannot take any family for 2 days. It's an insult to the people of Nigeria. We want our refinery to work. Let us refine our crude oil by ourselves and sell to the citizens of Nigeria at a very cheaper rate. This fuel subsidy, it has caused an hardship to the citizens of Nigeria, not only Nigeria workers.
A few weeks in, the naira was floated and forex allowed to trade unanimously with the parallel market. This also was received with initial celebration, and later the realization of the cons began to hit. A move applauded by the United Bank of Africa CEO Tony Elumelu, who says the move seeks to favor businesses in Nigeria and rightly secure the private sector stakeholders.
The private sector is encouraged with the bold decisions President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has taken, and we hope that in the fullness of time, Nigerians will benefit from it.
The NNPCL changed fuel pump prices, yet with several indices unsorted. All marketers exclaimed the high cost of importation of the commodity and other attendant repercussions, and this ensued a meeting between the president and the oil marketers. Tinubu's Policy Advisory Council also said addressing oil theft and pipeline vandalism, growing oil and gas production, and resolving the cash shortage after seeing the Tinubu-led administration suspend and detain the Apex Bank CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele 10 days after assumption of office, were part of his task before the unwritten 100-day watch mark, a move to remodel the economy, bring about growth and development through job creation, food security, and put an end to extreme poverty, as captured in his inaugural speech, necessitated his meeting with the Governors Forum.
If we think together and work together, Nigeria of our dream is not far away. Let's constantly deliberate, think together, and maintain an open door policy.
All of this mostly viewed with deep concerns over a perceived weak execution in sustaining the momentum of reforms or unleashing the full potential of Nigeria. In view of the hardship sponsored by the removal of fuel subsidies, Mr. President addressed the nation, acknowledging that he was aware of the plight facing many Nigerians, but announced that there was no easy way out, pleading with citizens to sacrifice a bit more as better days loomed, although promising no availability of quick fixes.
Our economy is going through a tough patch, and you are being hurt by it, I know. The cost of fuel has gone up. Food and other prices have followed it. Households and businesses are struggling. Things seem anxious and uncertain. I understand the hardship you face. I wish there were other ways, but there is not. If there were, I would have taken that route, as I came here to help, not to hurt the people and the nation that I love so dearly.
This gave more push to the all-grand palliative conversations, which have seen several experts and technocrats, including architect Ezekiel Nyaitok, write open letters to the president prescribing what exactly palliative should be, other than paltry bags of rice or cash transfers. Public transportation aid and freight of agricultural produce has been the most clamored palliative aid from the Tinubu-led administration. In a bid to reprioritize national and public spending, Mr. President has initiated several cutbacks and also several probes.
Government, Secretary General, delegates.
Voting for spectrumtv to recover for the lapses in County.
A very good morning to you and welcome to your morning news briefing Spectrum live from Uyo. I am Mary Joseph. We begin the news brief with the reports that the People's Democratic Party, the New Nigeria People's Party and the Labour Party have slammed the performance of President Bola Tinubu as he clocked 100 days in office. The parties noted that the Tinubu-led federal government has failed to meet the expectations of Nigerians, adding that the claim of the federal government that it inherited a battered economy is not excused. Away from that, the Department of State Services has arrested some officials of the Nasarawa State Emergency Management Agency and their accomplices for allegedly diverting palliatives meant for the vulnerable citizens. The suspects were accused of selling the palliatives in the modern market in Lafia, among others. A statement by the DSS spokesperson Peter Funaya said the service had recovered some of the items after an investigation into the matter. Afunaya noted that similar operations were ongoing in other states of the Federation. Meanwhile, the former governor of Ekiti State, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, has said the protest that trailed the fuel subsidy removal during the administration of President Goodluck Jonathan in 2012 was due to political interest. Fayemi said this in his keynote address delivered at the National Dialogue organized to celebrate the 60th birthday celebration of the founding National Secretary of Alliance for Democracy and fellow Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Professor Udenta in Abuja. Recall that Jonathan faced serious backlash for the fuel price adjustment, especially from leaders of the All Progressives Congress, who were then in different opposition parties, including the defunct Action Congress of Nigeria, Congress for Progressives Congress, All Nigerian People's Party, and the All Progressives Grand Alliance. We quickly head straight to foreign scene now, where Ukraine cyber operators are being deployed on the forefront lines of the war, dwelling close up with their Russian counterparts in a new kind of high-tech battle. Speaking inside the heavily protected SBU headquarters, he explained how his teams mix the skills of hackers and special forces, getting inside Russian systems, working alongside snipers and deploying the latest technologies. And in sport, the Nigerian Football Federation has said it will soon make a decision on the future of Super Falcons coach Randy Waldrum after extending the contract of his Super Eagles counterpart Jose Peseiro. Recall that the NFF President Ibrahim Gusau has said in an interview that the fate of both coaches would be decided this month. But while the Federation has handed a 6-month extension to Peseiro, Waldrum, who is currently in the US after he led the Super Falcons to the round of 16 at the last FIFA Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, is still waiting to get a clear picture of whether his relationship with Nigeria will continue. Details of this and many more in our news at 12. I am Mary Joseph. Let's head back to Rising Channel, where we have Francis and Uyai on standby. Do have a wonderful morning.
Government, Secretary General, delegates.
Voting for Spectrum TV to recover 45 seats in counting.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTime's DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the Constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police force.
No, my Lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My Lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My Lord, the Matters Council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my Lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court, my Lord.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my Lord. These cases are in court, my Lord. I'm just reminding your Lordship.
My Lord, sorry, my Lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
Every society is premised on the quality of relationships forged by its inhabitants. The health of these relationships determines how well people, relationships, organizations thrive and how long they stick together. Join Uyai Anyekan on Connect every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and on Sunday 2:30 to 3 p.m. on Channel 421 on StarTimes to catch all the conversations, interviews, real stories, and how to navigate relationships and family life in the 21st century. Real people, real faces, real stories. Connect live on Spectrum Television.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa
It's shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Rise and Shine, and we're coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. On Rise and Shine, we talk Africa, we talk Nigeria, topical issues of things happening in the country and on the continent, of course. This morning, we've looked at several issues, top of which is the fact that the NLC did go on with their two-day warning strike that started yesterday and today. And of course, we saw them across different states of the country force this particular strike action. Also on our conversation this morning is the fact that Philip Shuaibu, Deputy Governor of Edo State, has withdrawn his suit filed against Godwin Obaseki, Governor of Edo State, and some other agencies in the state. He says this owed to the traditional leaders and religious leaders that had called his attention to the growing rift between him and the governor of the state. Some of the conversations on our table this morning is the fact that the Senate is saying they do not have any expenses to cut down. They continue to see that there is nothing on their side that is putting pressure on the cost of governance. Of course, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is in India for the G20 summit, and now we know that Nigeria is considering being a part of the G20 League of Nations. What is this and how is this going to benefit Nigeria if we pull through with this particular membership? These and more are some of the conversations we've had so far on Rise and Shine. To catch up on all that, you need to follow us across all social media platforms, all of which you can find at spectrumtv.ng. Of course, we're going to move ahead with our conversation this morning, and we have our guest already on standby virtually to join us this morning. It's been 100 days since May 29 when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was sworn in as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We have seen several policy reforms and several attempts made to re-navigate Nigeria from the very murky waters that this administration has acknowledged that they came into as a country. They have said that Bola Ahmed Tinubu received a very distraught economy from the immediate past administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari. Now it's been 100 days. So far, so good. How well has it been?
Well, that will be left for our guest, Dr. Tom Fredfish, who is a journalist and a public affairs analyst, joining us from the city of Uyo to give us a good morning, Doctor. Welcome to Rise and Shine.
Good morning. Over here, good morning, viewers.
All right, welcome. How are you feeling this morning, Doctor?
Fine. We're doing good. We're feeling very great. Except we're having a lot of network here and could not reach the way on time as I was supposed to.
All right, we sincerely apologize. I know we should have taken this conversation a lot more earlier. But let's look at President Ahmed Bola Tinubu. During his campaigning, he said he had been prepared long before now to leave the country called Nigeria out of its multiple economic and other social infrastructural decay. But of course, we've seen first 100 days in office, we are plagued with the fuel subsidy removal and its attendant effect and different other issues. Insecurity seems to have soared within these last 100 days, regardless of the shake-up within the ranks and files of the Nigerian Armed Forces. How would you rate the first 100 days of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Let me be very fair to the President Bola Tinubu that 100 days is not enough to assess him for now. Number one, this is as a result of the avalanche of problems that he made. So we not look at 100 days to find any indices to assess him. Understanding that, I would like to comment that the president has not started well because of certain issues. I would like to want to point further if time will permit me. He has not started well until the fact that 100 days is not enough to assess. Why? It's one of the burning issues that has been in the forefront of his administration from day one, the renewal of fuel subsidy. Because when we can assess some of his plans for the renewed document, the president pledged to achieve stability of the petroleum product supply by deregulating. He also said that the fuel subsidy will be phased out systematically and in a way that it will maintain the social contract between government and the people. And finally, he talked about significant expansion of public infrastructure that will aid in the improvement of the well-being of Nigerians. Those are some of the issues that he promised when he was campaigning to become a president. So back on his first subsidy, but he did not keep to that promise, as from his swearing in the phase one, which was not planned, the subsidy is gone. And that statement had serious effects to the economy, as immediately the fuel stations began to close down and hardship began for the people. And in doing so, he was not prepared, because fuel is a very significant issue in Nigerian economy, judging by the fact that some other sectors depend largely on fuel to survive in the Nigerian economy. So you can't just set out a fuel subsidy without palliative or remedial measures to ensure that the suffering of the people is minimized to the bare minimum. Are you with me? Hello?
Yes, doctor, we are together. Go ahead.
Now, after doing that, it becomes a body. Then, secondly, the president first 100 days in office has been immersed by politics somersaults. When he knew that he's beginning to fail based on that subsidy statement, he now started to think of how to roll out policies and what to do. The first, he talked about giving 12 million Nigerians 8,000 naira each. And when Nigerians look at the president, what's happening? How can you, what are the indices? Do you have the social register? Are you going to use the one that was used by the previous administration? Because people have criticized and found details. And when the National Council met and they say, no, this is not feasible. You can't give Nigerians 8,000 naira. How long will they use it? What rate will they use? So that policy was dumped. So up till now, I think the Nigerian Labour Congress is protecting or on track on this same issue, which has led that for 100 days, because why? The president and his cabinet, the president as his managers were not able to find a clear-cut issues or areas on how to manage the fuel subsidy, which they promised. Now, one of the indices they promised was that in doing that, it will be straight out systematically. And the president relied easily on local supply. Perhaps the Dangote refinery that was already commissioned to start thorough investigation on how, on where, on when fuel will start coming out from the refinery. It shows that the president was totally, completely shut out from the Buhari administration. He was a political leader of the party, but he had no deep insight of what was happening in the party. And information is key. The data information, he could not act when he assumed office. Now, the issue here is, how do you achieve stability in the petroleum product by removing fuel supply? That is one of the aims. The advocate of fuel subsidy removal said that when they remove subsidy, price of petrol will be stabilized. But we have not found that happening. Because fuel, immediately something was removed, the price went up to 500 and something. Before we say jack, it was now moved down to 600 and something. And they were speculating that this price is still moved to 700 and something. Before the president said, no, we will stabilize. What was the reason given? They said the fuel increase or the fuel stability depends on the dollar. So if dollar keeps going high, it means Nigerians will buy more fuel. It means fuel subsidy removal is not the solution for now.
All right. Now,
it wouldn't have been removed.
Okay, so Doctor, from all that you have said, it's clear what Nigerians have stated, obviously, that this present administration was ill-prepared for the tax ahead. And, of course, the announcement of the end to fuel subsidy was also not well thought out and carefully planned for. And we know, like, presently, NLC is on the second day warning strike to the federal government. And part of the issues the NLC is striking for is for palliatives to be given to Nigerians to cushion the effect. Also, they're looking for reduced or subsidized means of transportation, the release of the CNG vehicles that the federal government promised, such that Nigerians will begin to see some level of relief as far as the fuel subsidy is concerned. Now, are you in support of the present strike by the NLC? Because we have seen the TUC taking sides with the federal government at this point. I recall, as at yesterday or day before yesterday, we saw the TUC meeting with the leadership of the new minister. Of course, the NLC boycotted that, and the cited reasons of the federal government always waiting for a strike order or a protest order to be issued before returning to the negotiation table.
Yes, I was going to summarize on that issue before I go on to some other issues where the president has not done well. But for now, looking at the strike of the labor union, now the question is, the federal government is asking for time to settle down to sort out the matter. The question is, the federal government allow Nigeria to settle down before they remove the first subsidy? Did they allow Nigerians, did they get the time frame, even though they were on the same side? They did not. Nigeria was a huge shock to Nigeria to just wake up one morning and discover that some price of it is gone. Now, what NSC is doing, they are on track. For the other labor union that is backing the federal government, it is politics. You cannot divide politics out of labor union activism. The NLC is trying to protect the members because, whether elected or not, this hardship resulting from fuel subsidy removal is affecting average Nigerians. So the NLC cannot still continue to be dormant after 100 days. So they are on track to bring to the notice of the federal government that the suffering is still there, it's perennial. At the same time, how is this palliative going to be disputed? For instance, the federal government promised 5 billion naira to state, but from most of the states are saying it is only 2 billion that has been disbursed. How do you reconcile that? So I am totally in support of the NLC to ensure that they press their demand, because one of the demands is increase in their monthly pay, which we all know today by the inflation of the country, it is difficult for the servant to solve. You're talking about fighting corruption. And when you're giving lip to for corruption, there is no way the citizens can actually survive with this argument. So that is correct. Another area, I think the policy for myself is the appointment of political the president coming to keep the ground running. The president had to wait for the official stipulated day, 60 days, before he only sent the list of ministers to the Senate. And in doing so, he didn't even send it completely. It shows that he was not prepared. If he promised to hit the ground running, he should, like other advanced clients, have his team of persons already on his desk. At least 30 days after assuming office. He should have sent those things. And besides that, we notice the substitution of ministers. The minister was already in the National Assembly for screening, and she was removed all over the place. What does that show? It shows that the president is not even in charge of what he's doing, and he doesn't understand or know the kind and type of quality of ministers he wants. So, besides the political appointment, also, we have experienced what we experienced in the last administration, where political appointees or political appointments are one-sided and treated to the ethnic group of the president. During the 8-year administration of the Major General or retired Major General Muhammadu Buhari, we discovered that most of the sensitive appointments were treated towards the north, and it has begun. The method currently reflects such ethnic political appointments. Like the Central Bank of Nigeria, there are other ethnic groups like the Igbo man is still there, but it seems to be to appoint an active central bank government from his own ethnic group, from the West.
Now,
also, the Inspector General of Police.
Okay, well done, Dr. Tom. Now, there's several things you've also raised this morning, but let's look at the fact that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has actually made some very big moves, but it's more like his execution is very shaky. Because when we look from subsidy removal to some of the policy conversations that he has had so far, experts will say that in the long run, it will benefit Nigeria holistically if the execution process was properly thought through and implemented effectively. But we see that even going beyond President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, implementation is a cancer that is eating into the system. Now, this is one of the big numbers I'm going to call, out in terms of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu now. On the very first day that he assumed office, we saw stock markets gain the most it has ever gained on the first day of anyone assuming office. Now, we saw that gain rise to 5.23% on the very first day that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, took office that day. And now this is the biggest stock that we have ever seen in the market. There's been several financial conversations. The Naira was floated. Forex was made to float parallel with the, the open market. What are the indices with regards to his financial policies so far? Where do you see it taking Nigeria beyond these 100 days that we've all been watching out for?
Okay, like I said in my very first statement, that 100 days is not enough to assess any administration, especially the package that was inherited by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. 100 days is not enough. But he has actually made some statements, like what happened, those gains we just mentioned as a result of the statement of the removal of fuel subsidy. This subsidy removal has been an issue that has been debated over years and has been driven by the IMF, who wants to see Nigeria as being a deregulated downstream petroleum. And in doing that, it somehow gives hope, visual hope to the system. And that is why you saw those figures moving high. But to whose detriment? The Nigerian people, it cannot in any way make those deft moves without considering the very essence of the administration, which is the betterment of the people. It cannot get so much fund, move your inflation level high, at the same time talking about funds. Now, how do you utilize this fund if your inflation is moving high? So it goes out to say that there needs to be a reconsideration in some of these policies. Some are good. With time, there is a possibility that it will work well. But we have always had the issue of implementation in Nigeria all the years back. We talk and talk and talk, but how will these issues, these policies be implemented to favor the Nigerian people? Don't forget, even the president has always said that this policy should not in any way affect the social contract between the people and government. And what is the social contract between people and government? Their welfare is their priority. Security, these are the main issues. But there have not been any visible improvement in the security in the last 100 years. As we speak, I don't know, I might be wrong, some students or some people, graduates, going for their youth corps service were kidnapped. And the bandits are requesting for ransom. And up till now, it's more than 3 weeks.
Yeah, no conversations yet.
So, the security situation is still difficult, it's still deteriorating. And there is no conscious move like we say this country. In the last 100 days, the president, he keep on meeting the defense chief, but there is no evidence of improvement. So it's an issue that must be looked into. What are these measures that are being taken to ensure that mere policy statement, because when the president pronounced, I want to do this, I want to do that, those are just mere policy statements. It goes nowhere if they will not put into proper axis of implementation. And these are stages. Irrespective of 100 days is very minimal, like I said, but we should be able to see these dev moves growing gradually into visible implementation so that people can say, yes, the president said this, we have seen the move. For instance, take 100 days for the president to think of what are these total effects that will help Nigerian workers and Nigerian people out of this subsidy removal? There is no conscious thing. We're talking about agriculture, fertilizer distribution. We all know most of these things are not monitored. They are not thoroughly implemented. And that's why the NLC is saying, show us concrete steps to ensure that these things you said will work. There are other agencies as a level in Nigeria, and they will tell you that the administration has not favored them.
Now, Dr. Tom, we are saying something now about the fact that most of these things are policy statements. We have not necessarily seen the move. And some of them are quite excitable. We are excited in the first moment before we find out, what the repercussions are going to be. Now just adding that, his move towards stabilizing the oil and gas sector has been very tantamount. We've seen the strongest oil theft probe that we have seen in several administrations. This particular administration has burnt more oil-laden vessels than we have ever heard in the history of this country. There is an adage in Nigeria that says it is from the club that you know where the dance is going to head. Because in the overall, we would agree, 100 days is not enough to tell where the president is going. But I think the biggest question is, in this president's club, can we tell where his dance is going to take Nigeria? And let me navigate that conversation back to oil and gas. The investments, the withdrawals, and some of these rash movements. Now, another thing that the Tinubu-led administration has been highlighted for is impromptu decisions. They just take abrupt decisions, which includes the oil vessels that have been burnt back and forth. The Senate asked the military forces, the armed forces rather, not to continue in burning those vessels that they have alleged to be stolen, but yet they vehemently said they were going to continue because those were statutory actions.
Okay. You talked about the increase in revenue. What is expected when you remove subsidy? Previous administration has always advocated that subsidy, Nigerians spend so much maintaining subsidies for our people. So when you remove subsidy, it is expected that the return, the allowance of such trillions of naira they advocate it is used for subsidy, reflects in the revenue of the country, which is what happened naturally. Now, besides that, another key point that you have made in that statement that I would like to respond to is trying to curtail the loopholes in our revenue. What are these loopholes? Illegal refinery stealing of our crude oil, which we have seen how the Navy are also fighting. The contracts for the surveillance and security of some of our pipelines, they give it to an ex-militant. Recently, it is all over the news that some of the boys of the ex-militants were caught stealing the same revenue. How can a police be caught stealing the police that is in charge of protecting a certain goods and communities caught stealing the same goods? Which means if those boys were caught or actually caught, as it is being around the media channel, that is not the first time, which means as they were giving contracts for surveillance, for security of this weapon, they too have been stealing the same oil. So the first thing the president should be doing, how do they block these loopholes? How are they going to secure Nigerian resources? Other militants have started, in short, this same Tempolo and his boys, they are still asking the government to renew the contract they had. Is it renewing the contract of stealing the oil that they're supposed to protect and to guide against other saboteurs? How do you block these loopholes? So also other Nigerian sources of revenue, internet generated revenue. How do you ensure that corruption will not deep? How do you block? These are the prospect issues that Nigerians expecting from the president to ensure that yes, we are going to get with you, the most subsidy, we are trying hard to try to get with you, but this money, how do we ensure that money generated gets to the purse of the federal government and not being stolen by a certain individual or some of the cabal, or like the allies of the allies that the president is alluded to have said. So the Navy needs to do more. The responsibility, the president needs to appoint key men that will deliver for him. The security, yes, overall, but what is the result? There must be a result. There will be tangible results after 100 days. It's not just policy statement of something we intend to do. It must be seen to be done. There have been no conscious efforts to ensure that our resources are protected or that the money that, according to the federal government laws, comes from the oil. The Senate will always give their recommendation. They will always summon. They will always set committee. They will always do their panelists. But Nigerians need results. Nigerians are so tired of so much talking. The country, the people are in a very deaf move. They want to see our leaders speak and do as they are saying. They want to see people act. They want to see responsive government. Responsive government is a government that takes responsibility, that acts at the same time, do what they promise to do.
All right, Dr. Tom Frisch, thank you so much for coming on this morning. I know you have been on a very busy schedule, and we'd like to advocate that we'll definitely have to call you back probably tomorrow to continue with this conversation. But we'll have to take a short pause here to go on a short break. When we do return, of course, we'll be returning with Rise and Shine.
Thank you very much.
thank you for still being there. This is Rise and Shine, and we've been having very strong conversations looking at serious matters holistically as it concerns Nigeria. But right now, we're going to veer off a little bit and stretch on the continent. Several coups have led in this continent in the past 2 months. Several things have been happening. Niger has gone on a coup. Gabon also ousted its president, Ali Bongo. Now, there are very many security interferences with regards to these kinds of activities. And we have joining us this morning a very reputable security expert and, security analyst, Dr. Yahuza Getso, is joining us this morning. Good morning, Doctor. Very good to have you on the show this morning.
Good morning, viewers. Good morning, listeners. Thank you for having me.
Very good. I hope you are doing well at your location this morning.
Well, I'm doing well. I'm right now at Katsina, and I'm doing very well.
Speaking of Katsina,
managing accordingly as it is in the country. Yes, everybody is managing.
You're managing what everyone is managing. Speaking of Katsina State, there seems to have been a resurgence of banditry in the north because we've seen Zamfara come under some heat and several other northern states at this time. I think it was a few days back when we had some wives go and abduct, allegedly so, wives on bandits as a result of kidnappings that happened in their local government. So talk to us about the resurgence of banditry in the north as of now.
Well, the situation remained as it was. There was never a change in the mode of operandi of the bandit kidnappers and their allies in northern Nigeria, and especially in the northwestern part of the country, and some part of the north central. That is in the areas of Kogi, Niger, Benue, Plateau, and others. However, I always see this as a negligence, as a sabotage, as an institutional weakness. Institutions of government, the security agencies lack capacities and ability and determination, and are also suffering from lack of required logistics and being understaffed in order to face the challenges. Most especially, more often, the issue of nonchalant attitude by some of these elements, we can say. Because when I saw that the DSS uncovered the plan to conduct a demonstration in the country being financed by politicians or whosoever, some enemies of the government, whatever name they give them, I laughed. I laughed. Because I wonder if DSS can uncover such activities, what deprives them and what has been depriving them, and what really is the militating factor that is forcing them or making them, incapacitating them and making them incapable, and what really is killing their morale and determination for them to trace and track the criminals and criminality, the activities of the bandit kidnappers and other allies of their allies in the north central and northwestern parts of the country. We have to ask ourselves a number of questions. The whole total number of the kidnappers who have been operating and terrorizing the areas of Katsina, the areas of Sokoto, the areas of Zamfara, the areas of Kebbi, Niger, Kaduna, a part of Kano and part of Jigawa, and to some extent, Kogi, Benue, Nasara, and Plateau, all of them are not up to 3,000. All the kidnappers and all the bandits are not up to 3,000 in number. So I wonder, what is the number of, how many battalions do we have? Military battalions do we have? How many DSS commands do we have in this state, as mentioned? How many area commanders do we have of the police, of Nigerian police force? And how many commanding units do we have of the Nigerian police force? And how many inspector general, assistant inspector generals of police, the AIG zones, do we have in these areas as mentioned, including the FCT itself? All the bandits, all the kidnappers, all of them are not up to 3,000. And all the leaders, the leaders of all the kingpins, the leaders of all the batches and branches are not up to 47, all of them. And they can easily be profiled. Their hideout, if there is, because I didn't believe there is anything hideout for these criminals. It's just lack of determination, lack of required logistics, lack of political support, and lack of interest in bringing an end to this menace. Otherwise, we could have the insecurity, the criminal and criminality activity could have been a story in northern part of the country.
Dr. Getso, these numbers are abysmally low. If we are talking about 3,000 bandits put together and 47 generals for the bandit order, it's far less than, you know, all of the troops that we have only in Nigeria. And this will be handled. But that will bring us asking the question, is it actually possible to erode a country of this level of insecurity, especially because it is stemmed on either Islamic insurgency or, you know, just banditry, as it were? Is it possible for a country to be absolutely rid of these kinds of issues?
Sorry, is it actually to do what?
Is it possible to have a country rid of this kind of insecurity, where we do not have this level of insecurity on our hands?
Yes, of course, it's possible. We have the country, we call it Nigeria. But in actual sense, it has a lot of ungoverned spaces. So you have a constitutional and unconstitutional leaders. In each and every state, you have constitutional governance and unconstitutional governance. Where some areas, governance, and you have unconstitutional commissioners of police and unconstitutional commissioners of police. You have constitutional intelligence structures and you have unconstitutional intelligence structures, whereby these criminals are even ambushing our trained military personnel, killing them like ants. Our trained police and DSS and others, killing them like ants. Because they lack capacity to do the needful. They don't have the logistics, and they are not being pushed by the political elite and the political administrators, as well as the elected politicians who are at the helm of the affairs. They are only after their capital desire of starving the economy and pushing the masses to the extreme end of the West, while they stay at the extreme end of the East, so that the masses will never come close to them. That's all. But actually, we can have the country, we can still call it a country, but we have a country that have a lot of ungoverned spaces. You know, we are living in a bombshell that can explode anytime.
Now, Dr. Getso, you have raised something that has become a really serious concern. Now, I will pinpoint. The DSS has seemed to veer off its original roles, and it's becoming part of chasing cat and mouse issues. We've had the DSS become more of, releasing press statements with regards to gathered intelligence. Before now, the DSS was a very revered security network. Why is the DSS now looking this infiltrated and losing out on the core of their duties?
Sorry, I didn't get your question.
Okay. Okay, I'm talking about the DSS, the State Security Service. We seem to have them running cat and mouse race, leaving the most important things that, are the roles of the agency. The DSS is involved in arresting and fighting over, whether it's the correctional facility that should have a person or not, forgetting what the main things are. And also, we are seeing the DSS, as opposed to times before now, releasing a lot of statements with regards to gathered intelligence. This seems to be abnormal with regards to the sanctity of the DSS. What's happening there now?
Well, I think there is a kind of a mix of reaction by all the agencies. Even though, of course, the agency is supposed to work in an interwoven strategy, whereby they work in harmony and collaboration and partnership with one another. But going by what is happening now, we can say that our intelligence is really becoming so thorough. And the management, the kind of services that are expected by the DSS to deliver and to provide enabling environment for the Nigerian police and Nigerian army and other security services to operate, it's not there because of those challenges I have mentioned. Understaffed, lack of required logistics, and lack of the push by political elites, political administrators, and the elected politicians who are governing, who are the leading, who are the helm of the affairs. So as far as we need our intelligence to remain relevant, and for our intelligence to be useful, and for us to get to the promised land, we must change the strategy we are using in managing and generating and harnessing and also utilizing the intelligence we are having around the first view of the environment called Nigeria as a country.
Okay, now let's move away from the insecurity conversations in Nigeria. You are a security expert that spans across several continents and several countries of the world. Now, Africa has been exposed to a lot of coups in recent times. Niger and Gabon are highlighted as the last two that it has occurred. What would you say are the reasons for these kinds of activities? And because when we are thinking coup, we're also thinking insecurity hand in hand. What is happening in Africa with regards to these levels of coup as it relates to security?
You know, my problem is, I know the coup in Africa is just starting. And not only in Africa, in almost all the underdeveloped nations. The challenge and the problem is lack of good leaders, who really means well for the countries, who really means well for the masses. You can see in other countries, in Gabon, in Mali, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea-Bissau, even in Cameroon, wherever there is coup, you will see masses are coming out in mass to demonstrate in support of the military, which means they are tired of the unrealistic democratic process. Leaders are being elected using the false strategic election process, democratic abuses, election process abuses, use of impunity, and the rest and the like. So as such, more coups will come to Africa. More African countries, more African leaders will be overthrown by the military. But my concern is the fact that who are these military leaders? Are they responsible? Are they serious? Are they committed? Are they really conducting the coup based on the reasons they are saying that insecurity? Yes, in Burkina Faso there are open coups. In Mali likewise, and other countries. Is there any improvement in terms of security, social and socio-economic life? If there is, then fine, the military can stay. Otherwise, like the one from that of Gabon, there is a lot of corruption, corrupt charges, allegations against me. So if at all the military are really serious and they are really going to provide the best and better leadership, because the major reasons why all these coups are taking place is because of three things. One, inability of the so-called democratic process to take place. Two, inability of the Democrats who have been so-called elected democratically using democratic process to lead by examples and to lead by the Constitution and to do the needful. And three, the issues of resource crisis. The mineral resources, whereby there is an influx of the foreign influence, of the diplomatic influence, of the influx of the interest of the Western world, that of France, Germany, England, UK, US, and others, Russia, and the rest, who are struggling for resource management.